Welcome back to This Is Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. With me, I have Professor David Aworawo, Professor of International Relations and Strategic Studies at the University of Lagos, Dr. Nnaemeka Obiaraeri, Investment Banking Executive, as well as Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director, Enough is Enough. Well, Yemi, it's good to have you back in the studio. And, quickly, we have had three guests. The Imam Raji, who in the spirit of the season talked about the celebration of Eid al-Adha, the festival of sacrifice today, the significance, the symbolism, and a number of other issues. Then we had Chief Johnson Chukwu, who talked about a number of economic issues, inflation, and also Nigeria taking a loan from the World Bank of $2.25 billion. And then, of course, we had Yunus Atanko, spokesperson of the Labour Party, discussing democracy and the battle for supremacy in the Labour Party. Let me start with you, Yemi Adamolekun.
Let's see. If we start with Eid, and I think it's just very interesting that as a country that's very religious, the last holiday, Ramadan, we had 3 days off. This one we have 2 days. Easter, we had 2 days. We're praying and spousing all sorts of wonderful things about sacrifice and love and all of that. But it doesn't show in any of our characters. So I just find the seasons very interesting, just the way we behave, not only to ourselves, but to our country, especially when our leaders talk about these things and by their very actions. And I think the gentleman that you had did speak to that, I think, very clearly, and I liked it, that there's one thing to say these things, but another in that our leaders act very differently. But on that, the point I actually liked that you brought up was the point about Hajj. And again, I liked what he said, is that, well, we don't know where is the money, because we know how much we spent. The way our Hajj, and this is not just about Muslims, also Christians that go to Israel on pilgrimage, we set up commissions that, in a sense, behave like tour operators, so that the ones who are negotiating with airlines, negotiating with hotels, helping people who want to go to Hajj or go to Israel sort out the logistics of their trip. And I'm wondering, why is a federal government a tour operator for citizens? As the gentleman said, you go on Hajj when you have the resources and you want to go. So if you want to go, if the government is maybe helping facilitate visa, which they can as a sovereign nation, but this whole tour operation thing that we're doing, and then we set a price and then people then pay, and this is what they now said happened this year because of the exchange rate changes. What they are told people to pay was now not sufficient, was why the government then had to subsidize. But again, the entire business of the commission is a money spinning machine, which is why you say 90 billion, but the people who are affected don't understand how you calculated it. It's easy to say 200 people had paid 8 million. The cost is now 12 million. The difference of 12 to 8, 4 million times 200 people equals Y, whatever that math is, and the government will now do that because of the exchange rate. What, Mr. Obiaraeri? Is that not how the math should be?
That is how it is, and it has to be very transparent. We need to know how the 90 billion was spent ab initio.
How did you calculate it? Yeah. Precisely. But that wasn't done. But anyway, I say all that to say that we really have no business as a country being in the operating business. Yes, would people lose their jobs in the different commissions? Yes. But people who do have the competencies can be reabsorbed into other agencies. On the issue of the Labour Party and their drama, I mean, I don't know. I'll leave the two gentlemen to speak to their drama. There's nothing to say on that one. What was the third thing? The economy. Are we not tired, quite frankly? Because I'm personally very tired. Every day, kiniko inflation, something, we're borrowing money. The fruit basket or the food basket of the country is under attack. This one down. I mean, there's nothing we have said, we will say, that is anything different. What would be nice to talk about is to talk about a government that actually seems to be paying attention, a government that actually seems to care. So when in your market, people are selling yam by the slice, there were some videos supposedly circulating because tomatoes had become so expensive. Cucumbers were replacing tomatoes and people were adding pepper to turn it into a sauce or paste of some sort. I still can't quite imagine what that looks like, much less tastes like. And I'm saying this not to be funny, but I'm saying that in a country where you have very real issues with how people are living and surviving, we are more interested in buying a new jet for our president and our vice president, which the National Assembly, our rubber stamp assembly, just approved. This is after we just launched a new house for our vice president. I love these things. They're just, the gentlemen, am I the only one in this country? Because all of you are looking at me. Because I'm wondering, I don't understand why, under these conditions, these are the things we think are priority issues. And then even the way we communicate it. We're going to buy a new jet because the cost of maintaining the current jets are too expensive. It would be nice if you said after that statement, then we plan to sell the jets. It would be nice if you say that on average, the jets of presidents around the world are about 5 to 10 years. Ours are now 19 years and causing issues, so we want to buy. But we're going to wait on that until, I mean, really, there are countries where their presidents fly commercial, but again, this is Nigeria. We don't do such. But I say all this to say that as you can see, I haven't mentioned anything about inflation in a very real sense, economic sense. Maybe Mr. Obiaraeri will say that. But I think what's disturbing about that, oh yeah, you talked about minimum wage. I listened to Tunde Fashola on the platform's democracy special issue. And he explained the context of minimum wage. That minimum wage, the history of it is a wage per hour in contract nation. So you, as an employer of labor, you can plan your production because you say, I need you to work for 4 hours. This is how much you get paid per hour, and that's it. But what Nigeria is actually negotiating is a minimum salary, not a minimum wage in that sense, because we're not doing it per hour. And the ripple-on effects of a minimum salary for the country, again, doesn't only affect the public sector. It also affects the private sector. And so the conversations around that, what that looks like. There was a gentleman who was saying that it seems that every time we want to do this, we disband the original committee working on it, and we start from scratch, so people don't also have institutional knowledge, which is why Mr. Johnson made the point that he was surprised to hear the president say, give me data. And he's wondering, how are you negotiating without data? You're negotiating based on what? But you say all that to say that one cannot be upset with labor when they're making these demands, when the government is directly, literally in our faces saying that it doesn't matter what's happening in the country, we will continue to live our best lives. You guys deal with it, you'll be all right. And so as a people, as leaders, we really need to take these things a bit more seriously because we're continuing as if all is well. It shouldn't get to the point. I mean, Labour did their 2 days and everybody's upset. They shut down the airports, they shut down this. But them shutting down things, while there are parameters within which labor unions can go on strike, forced the conversation, forced them to be paid attention to. We shouldn't always get to that point. But it seems, Mr. Obiaraeri, that we like.
Yes. Okay. I want to address the issue of inflation and the issue of borrowing.
Don't tell us numbers. So
borrowing 2.25.
We're interested in numbers.
Yes. It's not the numbers. No.
Sorry,
I totally agree with him.
Before you go on, Dr. Obiaraeri, but on an honest note, just to push back on that, what do I want to do with 34%? Like, what is it going to do for me to talk about inflation rate at 34%?
It's more than 39, 30%
exactly.
Of it. Even food inflation more than 40% for those of us that go to the market. I don't look at numbers. I want to profile solutions because we know the truth. $2.25 billion. And what was the reason for borrowing such constitutional funds from IMF and World Bank? They said to cushion the effect of shortfall in revenue from oil and the poverty that brought about because of the reforms of Mr. President. And I say to Mr. President, it's not the reform of Mr. President. The reforms of Mr. President, we are spot on. The problem are the underlying variables that are supposed to back that reform. That is not there. But of course, the box rests on its table. And I'll give you an example. I'm coming, Yemi. When we liberalize the market and then when we remove subsidy on petroleum product, there were assumptions that backed that.
Okay.
The assumption was the refineries were supposed to have started working because they told us before he assumed office that those refineries will work by July after they approved $1.5 billion to do it in 2021. The assumption was that crude oil output will go up because it started ramping up when he became president. Now, crude oil output had never gotten back to the level it was when Buhari took over at 2.24 million barrels a day. And the current GMD of NNPC told us gleefully in 2021 that Nigeria lose about $1.9 billion of crude oil to thievery and the inefficiencies. Since 2021 till now, the same story. One would have expected, Mr. President, when you implement a reform, and we talk about foreign exchange merger, when we talk about float, no country actually floats its currency without money fully. Of course, it wasn't as if he floated it. He removed the multiple exchange rate windows through which over $100 billion was looted out of this country, and which was a good policy. But to be able to defend the naira, we must have huge forex inflow and liquidity. And the huge forex inflow and liquidity must come from the area of crude oil sales and output remaining at the level it was in 2014, 2015. And again, there should have also been plug the leakages in the downstream oil and gas sector. Look at from 1999 when Obasanjo became president to 2009. Our daily PMS consumption was never up to 28 million liters a day, which corresponds with the records at the U.S. Energy Administrative Department. But all of a sudden, under Buhari, the number went to 60 million, which is Ponzi criminal. We know what is going on there. It's massive criminal. Because National Assembly did a probe in 2010 and 2011. They discovered that out of the 45 million, 52 million liters a day import under Desiani, only 29 million came in. Other people are saying they funding money. What one will have expected, Mr. President? He's not going to borrow money to cover the holes. You have a liquid asset that is being paid for, and you have people who are at the commanding height and leadership of the oil and gas sector under the Buhari era who had been there. He's an oil and gas man. There are people who work with him from Orlando to other places who are more qualified and can ramp up. If you hand over an NPC to Tony Elumelu or to Jim Ovia or even to Femi Otodola, output will go back to 2.3 million liters barrels a day in less than 6 months. So why is he still keeping?
What if you hand it over to me?
but it will happen. So why Mr. President is still keeping the remnants of the canker worms and the sleaze and inefficiency he hated from Buhari, both at NNPC and NNDPRA, is something. Sometimes I begin in my subconscious mind. Is he under a spell? I'm a Christian. Proverbs 25:5 says, "Surround a king with wicked men. Even if the king has good intention, they will mess him up. Surround a king with wise men, and the king, even if he doesn't know anything, will rule righteously." If the reforms he did was spot on, if I am president, I will have done the same thing. But the problem, he has surrounded himself with people who are not telling him the truth. The first thing he will have done to make his reform work was to carry out massive clearance at the NNPC, at the NNDP. See, ask anybody within the industry, from Mobo, why did Total leave Nigeria to go to Angola to invest $6 billion? Ask anybody in the industry, from Mobu, from Total, because of the regulatory bottlenecks, the inefficiencies at the NMDPRA. Most of them the cost of crude oil production in Nigeria is higher than other places. The inefficiencies, the manner of convoluted arrangements, and this an oil and gas man, a man that was treasurer of Mobu, became president. He has people around him who are oil and gas people who understand this market. The first thing he would have done was to clear out the inefficiencies that have been there since 2015 and put in his own men. If he had done this, if we have crude oil output at 2.3 million barrels a day today, and we remove the criminal sleaze and we get our output, our consumption of PMS to the level it's supposed to be, between 38 to 35 million liters a day, we will have enough liquidity in this market that dollar to naira will be at 1,199 naira it was in town. But the problem is, he has spot-on policies, he has some spot-on programs, but he has a team of players around him, especially in the oil and gas, that are messing up most of his programs. And you need to clear a circle of them.
Yes, you keep repeating that. And I find it very difficult to understand how you can say someone's policies are good, but if you want to assess a policy, you assess it not just in the letter of what it is, but you assess it in also the spirit of how you plan to implement it. So you can't, and I think I'm just saying that we can't, because I can't say that if I have a policy that this phone needs to move here to improve the quality of life of Nigerians, I've said that is my policy. But as the phone is sitting here, there is a brick sitting on it. I'm sorry, and I make no plans to remove that brick. But I'm saying, I have said that my policy is to make Nigerians' life better by moving this.
How does that help? Let's bring Professor Aworawo into the conversation.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yemi was saying that he was tired of the economy. Now she's more interested. It shows that we can't run away from it because it affects all of us. Yeah, the aspect I want to look at, yes, Dr. Obiaraeri has addressed the oil and gas sector. And I pray and hope that the president and those around him would work to see what could be done so that a whole lot can be gained from that sector to stabilize the economy so that in the next 3-4 months, we won't go to China again to go and borrow more money or go to IMF to go and take more loans and all that. When we have a structure where we can raise funds to be able to, take care of those things we are going to borrow money for. The other aspect I want to look at has to do with, and our guest talked about it. The companies that are leaving Nigeria in droves. Guinness, now one company has come into Cholera. Yes.
From Singapore.
I made this point the other time that when you have a trend, it is important to find out why what is happening is happening. Something is wrong with the policies in affecting the manufacturing sector, which needs to be, looked into, such that those companies can stay. People want to stay where they can conduct their businesses, freely, make profits, and of course contribute to the economy. But when the environment is not there, they say that dollar is shy to go to where it cannot reproduce itself. If he knows that it will be hot, it will simply go somewhere else. That needs to be looked into. Going about all over the world looking for investors to come is a waste of time because they won't come. If the few that will come will leave as soon as possible, because those same things that are making the ones here to leave will make those ones to leave as well. So that's a fundamental issue the government needs to pay attention to address. In addition to, of course, all the other contributions, and then minimum wage. I also agree with him that the productivity in the civil service is low. So if we're asking for a living wage, there also has to be increased productivity. In fact, in some ministries, it's almost like the ministry is like social security, where they just pay. If whether you like, you come to work or not. I heard that Zamfara was paying 7,000 to workers until they increased it to 30,000. If you are paying only 7,000, it's like it's not like social security. So again, it comes to the point about the private sector. If the private sector is sound, people will be interested in going to government to work. They will work in the private sector, develop their skill, earn well, and live well. Few people will be interested in going to the civil service. It's because the private sector is comatose. Everybody wants to. If you advertise now for 20 slots in any of, you will see 1 million applying, and that tells you the crisis, economic, social, that Nigeria faces. And these are things I think need to be addressed. For the economy to be able to move forward, and of course, for the quality of life of Nigerians to improve. Let me just comment briefly on the Hajj thing and the season. The mismatch between how religious Nigerians are and how Nigerians behave. Those are things that need to be addressed. It's one thing for I go to church, I go to mosque, I want to go for. And of course, Nigeria is supposed to be a secular state, and government is giving so much money to, And then finally, the way the government has carried on, in the vice president's house, I heard 21 billion or something like that. A house, 21 billion. When people talked about Wigwe's house for 10 billion or 11 billion, they were so proud. One house for so much, and now we're having a house for times 2.
Bro, this is not like your house in the village.
I know.
Presidential village.
You also look at
There's a difference.
There is time for everything under the sun, Ecclesiastes, right? At this time, in political analysis, what we call the elite capture of the state.
Yeah.
That is where we are now. Where in this economic situation, those national assembly can buy cars of 160 million. They can a house of 2.something billion. We are going for jets for the presidency. That is what happens when you have elite capture of the state. And one thing to add, another thing I want to make to this is that countries that have done well, that are doing very well socially, economically, or the Scandinavian countries, Sweden, Norway, and just name it, they are countries that have almost eliminated elite capture of the state. So Nigeria is in the wrong direction. The way government is carrying on is in the wrong. In fact, we're on the way to Golgotha. That has to change. So that Nigerians who can support, when those in government are sacrificing, Nigerians can support. That is the only way Nigeria can come out of the doldrum.
Why should it change?
Well, let's go to South Africa. And Prof, I'll start with you this time. South Africa's parliament has re-elected Cyril Ramaphosa as the country's president, following a landmark coalition deal between the governing African National Congress, ANC, and opposition parties. The new government of national unity combines Ramaphosa's ANC, the the center-right Democratic Alliance DA, and smaller parties. In his victory speech, Ramaphosa hailed a new coalition and said voters expected the leaders to act and to work together for the good of everyone in our country. Leader of the main opposition Democratic Alliance has hailed the agreement, saying the coalition, which also includes the Nkata Freedom Party and the Patriotic Alliance, will chart a new course for the country. Correspondents say the Democratic Alliance advocates free market economics, which are at odds with the left-wing traditions of the ANC. They say the DA is also seen as representing the interests of the white minority, something they dispute, but which is deeply embedded in the ANC's perception of them. So this coalition is not necessarily a natural alliance, some persons say. Well, Prof, let me start with you. Now the hard part begins. President Ramaphosa will be sworn in on Wednesday. After the swearing in, he will have to appoint ministers. So the hard part begins, apart from how they can blend ideologically.
Yes, it's interesting. I never thought that the ANC would be able to, find common grounds with the DA. I mentioned it the other time that given the ideological differences, that would be very, very difficult to achieve. It's intriguing that they have managed to achieve that. And then, just like we have said, after the swearing on Wednesday, then the government will face the issue of, appointing ministers. Now, the point I want to make is this. This could actually be good for South Africa, depending on how the actors approach it. The coming of the DA into the government will help to reduce corruption substantially. It will limit the capacity of the ANC to be able to carry on without anybody calling anybody to order. The DA is now there to call the ANC to order when corrupt practices, when they spot corrupt practices. So it could be good. Of course, when you have this kind of coalition, concessions will have to be granted. I do not know the extent to which the DA is willing to allow the ANC to continue the Black Empowerment Program, which I think is very good, considering the history, the experience of South Africa up to 1994. The DA had been opposed to it until now. The ANC insists it must continue. I do not know what they have agreed to as far as that Black Empowerment Program is concerned. So a whole lot of things that will unfold as they move on. But my advice to all of them is that governance should be about the people, and they should be ready to make sacrifices, compromises, not sticking to their strict ideological lines. If they do that, things will turn topsy-turvy, and the government will collapse in a short while, and that might plunge South Africa into political crisis. So my advice is they should be moderate, they should be measured, and the common good should be the defining factor of what they do.
Dr. Obiaraeri.
For me, the lesson from South African election is very simple. The ANC has become so complacent, and the results clearly show that the South Africans are not having it. And of course, with the kind of merger with the kind of arrangement that they have now, there's going to be a lot of checks and balances. But for me, the transparency, the credibility, and the fairness of that election is something that we must emulate from this part of the world. You saw their collation center compared to that of Nigerian collation center. You could see online real-time result transmission. There was no ballot boxes snatched. There was no doctrine of results or result sheets being mutilated. There was no ethno-religious gaslighting and slurring anywhere. And you could see that all the parties accepted the result as free, fair, and credible. And of course, we recently celebrated June 12th. And I always say it, everybody was June 12th, but we forgot that election was the freest, the fairest, and most credible election. And there was a man that conducted it, Professor Humphrey Mosu. That man is yet to be celebrated. He's a 82-year-old man. We should realize that there was somebody who conducted an election that was free. We didn't have beavers. We didn't have anything. I saw it was a Muslim ticket. And the MKO was an enigma. He went to Anambra State. I saw his result. He got 53% of the vote in Anambra State. He won another state in the southeast because we had about 4 states then. You could see that he cleared practically everywhere. Even in Kano, he defeated Tofa. If that election was allowed to stand, we wouldn't be where we are today. That lesson from June 12, 1993 is something we must take as we march towards 2027. If there's any gift President Tinubu should give to, just like Yar'Adua did.
Why should he though? I
No,
don't understand.
Yar'Adua, when he became president.
But he said it immediately after the election. Then set up the, what is that panel?
OIS report.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
So I'm sorry, no, but this is 1 year later. Neither the president nor his party has acknowledged there was a problem with the election. So I don't know why we're on this thing about before 2027.
Yemi, we need to keep on appealing to their conscience.
So it's begging we're going to do.
Of course we need to. What will you do? This is democracy. Okay. It's give and take. You know, like Prof rightly shared. You saw nobody believed DA and the ANC could ever work together. And I tell you.
But the terms of the agreements will be interesting.
Yemi, see, Nigeria is a very funny place. So. He may be the commander-in-chief, but he has people around him. It's like...
Well, he just abused everybody around him.
No, I was sharing with you when we were talking about outside there about Prof. And I said, a man that is 90 years old, people must also cut him some slack. I'll give you an example. I have a 75-year-old mom. I know how I manage him, how I manage her. So the truth is, we need to keep on appealing. We need to keep on providing suggestions because
we are not lacking suggestions, Mr. Obiaraeri.
If we want to fix this land, we need to look back. In 2014, we were the biggest economy in Nigeria under Jonathan.
On the continent.
Today we are number 4, and if possible, we may enter number 6. I looked at the top 10 countries with GDP per capita. Nigeria is not even among the top 20. In Africa, we are only giant of Africa, only in population. In no other parameters are we giant of Africa. Creativity. So, that's the private sector thing. So we need to appeal to them. Look at South Africa. If President Tinubu, like I said, if President Tinubu can actually restructure Nigeria the way he has muted it and then give us electoral reform, I tell you, his name will be immortalized.
Let me just add something.
Okay.
In South Africa, they also had technical glitch.
They did.
But they didn't take advantage of that to grab.
Exactly.
So Nigerians, apart from your appeal to Tinubu, Nigerians themselves, there's a lot we need to tell ourselves.
Yes.
In fact, when the glitch was fixed, and they wanted to return, they said, no, the manual thing was already okay. Let us continue with this.
They are Nigerians.
That is what the problem. So the ordinary Nigerians, not just the president.
176,000 polling booths, 8,809 electoral ward, 774 local government. Professor Mahmoud was not in all those places. I want us to understand this thing.
In any of them.
Listen, if the corpers that collected at the local government, at the polling booths, and the professors who are now rioting everywhere looking for minimum wage, and the teachers and lecturers have done the right thing and said, okay, we will not change the result at the electoral ward level. Or level. We won't be where we are today. I just is enjoyed because of one professor named Noti.
Obiaraeri, quickly.
It's all of us are all complicit on these things.
We're all very complicit.
Quickly.
So there's this, and I just will end on this. It's a very interesting chicken and egg situation, leaders and followers. And we're all, and the classic definition of leadership is that leadership is influence, and all of us have influence. So you're right. There's a role for followers to play. But when you have a country where you are consistently shown and told that there are no consequences to bad behavior, people will behave badly.
It's true.
It's not a Nigerian thing. It's a human thing. Yeah. Now, in that context, the people who then have the responsibility to show and say differently are those who we've given positional leadership in every sphere, from religious leaders to public leaders to private sector leaders. So I think, to your point, while we as Nigerians, and I think that's the thing, at the end of the day, we as Nigerians need to decide what it is that we want. Yeah. Do we want the status quo? And if that's what we want, maybe we don't need to stop talking less and just be okay with the madness that we're in. Okay, but if we want differently, then collectively we need to decide.
Every man looking into the mirror.
Before we go, just one more topic, and this is public interest issue. At least 30 persons are known to have died from an outbreak of cholera sweeping through Nigeria. 65 other cases have been confirmed from January 1 through June 11 across 96 local government areas in 30 states. The Nigeria Center for Disease Control and Prevention has alerted the public to the increasing spread of the disease, even as the rainy season intensifies. In Lagos State, 60 hospital admissions have been recorded, and with deaths in 48 hours. A total of 1,141 suspected cases have been recorded in 10 states. These include Bayelsa, Zamfara, Abia, Cross River, Bauchi, Delta, Katsina, Imo, Nasarawa, and Lagos. So, Yemi, let me start with you. Cholera. I thought we were part of the WHO program called WASH, Water and Sanitation and Hygiene.
I've talked about it. I'll pass on to the gentleman.
You don't want to discuss cholera?
No. I've talked too much already.
Okay. For me,
Dr. Obiaraeri, briefly.
We need to improve on our hygiene. we also need to take preventive measures. You know, there are vaccines out there, and I will encourage. And then, again, that also goes to our health sector. We need to carry out a lot of reforms. I was sharing with somebody. I said Nigeria is the only place where we do not have universal health insurance cover. And I said it's 270 million people. We can actually program it under a PPP program. 50,000 naira coverage for everybody. If those that can do more to cover it, can do it. And it will raise about 10.6 trillion naira for that sector alone. And we can do it. But we need to put the PPP structures in place. For one person, I told her, I said, if it is put in place, I can actually pay for 100 people. There are many people that can do it, but we need to put, but there must be enforcement. The operators and the health insurance providers and regulators must be in sync so that the service will be so efficient. If we have it, Nigeria will be in the right place.
Professor Aworawo, do we need to go back to the days of sanitary inspectors? So
Well,
that people will understand that hygiene is important.
I think we got two things about this cholera thing. The health sector that is not what it should be. So much has been said about that. And then second, hygiene. We have had people even in IDPs in camps. If you see how clean they manage to keep where they stay, they don't have the best of conditions. But cholera cannot go near there. Yeah. The place is spick and span. So if sanitary inspectors are those that would help us enforce to get the people to be clean, so be it. Because this cholera is tied directly to hygiene.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Aworawo, Dr. Obiaraeri, and Yemi Adamolekun. You've been watching This Day Live, the Sunday talk show, here on Arise News. I'm Ruben Abati from my entire team here in Lagos. It's bye for now, and thank you very much for watching.